Yo ho, the simple life for me. I know it's supposed to be pirate, but that doesn't fit the theme of the video. Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, today we're talking about the simple life, which in watercolor and art is not always so simple. This is one of my most requested videos, and bit by bit I'm trying to go through and target some of these highly requested videos. A lot of times though, it takes me a while to figure out how I'm going to treat the subject, and that has definitely been the case here in simplifying. A lot of you out there want to paint looser, and you want to know how to simplify subjects, and it's a great question. Now I could give you the simple stock answer, and that's just practice. Get out there and just start drawing and painting and try to reduce the detail. And I think you're going to find out that this video sort of answers the question again in that same way. For us artists who paint landscape a lot, it is the most complex thing out there probably. You know, woods with all the branches and leaves and just detail everywhere. Yeah, it's overwhelming, and that has been probably the crux or the focus of that question. And when I'm doing studies to try to reduce detail, that's usually where I'm focused, is with foliage. So how to do it? How do I say? There is no set of instructions. The best approach is a reductive approach, and I mentioned that in this video, and you'll see what I mean by that. That's just render it the way you normally do, as detailed as you wish, and then do iterations after that that subtract detail bit by bit and see what you can get away with. So if there are any instructions that I could offer, that's it. But what I want to do is just take you through a process. I posted some photos the other day on Instagram, many of you saw, and I just brought a whole new wave of requests. Please, Steve, do a video on this. So I'm going to look at those photos I posted on Instagram and make some comments about them. And then we're going to go through and do a tree, and I'm just going to show you a process that I use sometimes when I am doing studies, watercolor studies, to be simple, abbreviated, and clean. And it's all about elegance. It's all about brush strokes, of a passage of color, and watercolor is just one of the mediums that just shines when you do it that way. Now there are all kinds of ways to paint in watercolor, and I am a big fan of most all of them, including the highly rendered, highly detailed ones. And this isn't even about me becoming less detailed and less realistic. It's not what I want to do, believe me. But there's always occasion, whether it's sketching, whether it's in a painting that focuses detail in one area and takes it out of another, there's always opportunities to simplify that detail in spots and places. And when you do that, you don't want to make it look like something's missing. You want to make it look intentional, not just intentional, but elegant and masterful. So that's my goal when I do these. Follow along as I go through one process, and maybe it'll give you ideas for studies and exercises. Anyway, on to the demo. This actually was a study that I did in a sketchbook and posted on Instagram. A number of you that follow me there saw that. It's a useful thing. It's a useful thing in developing style, especially for plein air, for sketching, for doing looser styles. And there's always going to be cases for me where I want to put detail in one area and not in another. And there are just times when you want to treat foliage very simply. I can't really give you step-by-step instructions for how to simplify foliage. I mean, there are probably 100 ways to do it, 1,000 ways to do it. But one thing I can tell you in common is that you're just reducing detail, and so you're dropping out more and more detail, and you're trying to find effective ways to do that. It can be brush strokes, it can be the size of your brush, it can be the way you draw the outer shape of the bush or grass or tree or whatever it is. But a good way to approach it is a reductionist approach. Do several iterations as I've done here, and each time try to treat it more simply. What's going on here is I started with this one. This was sort of my warm-up, done sort of in the usual way. So what I did is I went to this one and then this one, and I was trying to meld areas that were similar in value. So that's my second good tip, is find ways to join them into solid shapes. Bigger solid shapes. Okay, from here I went to here, And you can see I used a little less shadow here. Here I was trying to see how the edge would look against the dark background, so that was just sort of a separate thing I threw in. From there I went to here, and now I'm getting somewhere. That's kind of squatty and characterless, but I'm starting to get the level of simplification, and sometimes that's all it is. It's finding a poetic combination of shapes that work in a simple way. And it takes experimentation. This was my next attempt, and I decided to do more like an evergreen bush. Here I ended up kind of getting a little more detailed. Then I was trying a different shape that had different value shapes throughout the middle of the bush. The first time I really felt like I hit the goal of this exercise was this one, and that's why I marked it with a little rubber stamp. That was what I was after. That was poetic to me. It was elegant. It was a very, very economical set of brushstrokes that created that. It was fresh looking, and I was thinking, yeah, that's what I was after. I continued on from that point and did these two, this one and this, and they're similar, but that's how I approached it. Just kind of went from what I usually do down to what I thought worked, and reducing detail, trying to find ways to reduce detail each time. Alright, so let me just take you through an exercise of how I might simplify a tree. We're going to be working with this small, simple little tree here out in the middle of the field. The first thing you're going to want to do is spend some time observing, and you'll need reference. I mean, do not do this out of your head. If you're having trouble with trees and foliage, and you're doing them out of your head, that's probably your main problem. Trees have very distinct characters, and it's a lot better, a lot more realistic if you can actually be using real tree reference that's got some interest and some character to it. This has sort of a triangular shape, so I'm noticing that. Then I'm noticing where there's some dark internal value patterns. So go through your reference and characterize it to yourself. Actually describe it to yourself. And then set out to do a number of studies of it. If you want to, you can start out just drawing it. Now what I'm using here is a medium wash water-soluble graphite pencil. So I'm going to start and warm up, and I'm not going to draw every leaf. I'm going to draw the overall shape and characteristic of the tree. And I'm purposely making sure that I don't draw all these little limbs and all these little clumps of leaves. Sometimes it's not as comfortable to start out with these things with watercolor. I know I can loosen up in certain ways with pencil that I can't always do with watercolor. So I've got a nice kind of expressive tree shape there. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go in now, turn my pencil on its side. I'm going to just, because I want something to sort of simulate some brush strokes, and just pop in a couple of these dark values. Simple, simple, simple. Let's get a little tone in these branches here. Just going to give a little bit of a wash to these areas that I toned. And I'm going to give an overall tone to the rest of the tree, the lighter parts. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's add a little bit of nondescript ground here. I think that loosened me up and warmed me up good enough. So now my goal is to do a nice, loose, simple tree with this same brush. And I like some of the forms that I got here, so I'm going to try to keep that. And when I'm doing these simplification exercises, I'm going for fresh, abbreviated strokes. That's darker than I wanted it, but we'll add some water. And I don't want to brush over this, so if you're doing this, try not to like brush. Just do these like quick little dabs. And those bushes I showed you previously, that's how I got those ones that I thought were most successful. Now I could leave it fairly flat like that, or while it's wet, I could add some shadows that charge in. You see how I'm just laying my brush there and picking it up. That's all I'm doing. You know, and I like that. I think that's fresh. Let's see. Sometimes you have to add the branches before the trees kind of start making sense. These are going to run together a little bit, but that's all right. Yeah, I'm real happy with that. And as this dries, I can go back in if I want and sharpen up, you know, some of these branches. But really, this is just a study, so I don't know that I'll do that. Just do it with your ground too. Just kind of bloop bloop de doop, and you're done. Yeah, very happy with that. That's what I'm going for. And remember, you're training yourself to see broader shapes, broader values, and abbreviate and make your brushstrokes very gestural. Alright, so let's try this again. And one of the things you can do is switch brushes. I'm going to go to a bigger flat. Well, the brush strokes are not as important as keeping in mind that structure, overall structure that you see with the tree. Lay it down on the edge and get those thin. You can press a corner into the paper and see what happens. And please don't be precious with these. If they fail, so be it. You're trying to learn something here. You know, I get frustrated because so many people, you know, don't want to try something just because they're afraid it's going to turn out wrong. Well, it probably will. I've got pages, you guys don't see the pages of stuff that I do that turn out wrong. Not to mention the years of stuff that ends up in the trash bin. So I'm going to lay in just a couple of darker values. It's looking kind of odd, but that's alright. Just laying my brush down there. And again, I'm looking at these kind of dark little parts. And you can even come in and paint the tree trunks with these just by going down the edge. And actually that makes for a pretty cool looking tree trunk. And I'm hoping to touch some of these areas that are still wet and have these shapes meld together so it doesn't get too complex. And as this is less wet now, I'm going back into these dark areas gingerly as I can, darkening them up. Because it's not as wet and it's not going to move as much now. You know, there are all kinds of ways you can can treat these. As I said, on the edge, mashing down a corner. Another way is with a flat is a turn, kind of a little turn like that. And at any point here, I should probably just leave it alone. But, you know, I'm tempted, like everybody else, is just to keep going. I'm just trying to give these edges a little bit more interest. With minimal brush work. That's the goal, that's the experiment. And then if you can bring some of those limbs up into the tree and connect them, it just makes the foliage look that much more convincing. And I think we're going to stop there with that one. Alright, so let's try one more. This time I'm going to use a quill, bigger around than the first round I did, and we're going to try going more fluid. You know, and you may look at these and say, yeah, I'd like to incorporate that or be able to incorporate that into some kind of underbrush or whatever. Or you look at it and say, no, that's really not what I want to do. So that's what these exercises are great for. And with these fluid type shapes, I'm going to keep this almost all a contiguous wash, and then I'm going to charge in. As I dip my brush, I'm going to vary the color a little bit. So you see I got one contiguous sort of shape. And this is another way you can handle it. So just all kind of ways. And now while it's wet, and I've got this on about a 45-degree angle, so that kind of helps you because most of these shadows end up down at the bottom of these clumps. But you can dab them in and let them run to the bottom. You know, I think half the time, and I know there are a lot of you can identify with this, half the time overworking something, it's just because you're having so much fun you just don't want to stop, you know? But I think I need to. I'm going to come in just with a couple of places, just some very judicious edge detail. And I really like that. I think I'm going to fill in a little more shadow here. A little more shadow there. Now this one I think I'm going to let dry before I add the branches. But you see what I'm doing again. I'm just laying my brush down, picking it up, not even stroking. And I want to add a little shadow there. And okay, I'm going to stop. Gonna stop. Alright, so I'm just going to go in here and make some tree branches. Yeah, and I think this makes a pretty nice little convincing tree shape. And we'll just go in here and add a little ground. Let that bleed. Alright. Now there's one other thing I wanted to show you, and I almost think I should have done this first. But another thing that's a good idea to practice for more distant trees or on backlit trees or trees that are in a sort of a dark canopy with no direct sunlight, it's a good idea to practice tree shapes that are flat. No shading, no dark values. And you will see quite a lot and have a lot of opportunities to paint trees that way. And I'm just going to do one or two over here. Whoops, that's just habit. Dabbing in a darker color. Well, in fact, you can even just kind of simplify, take the green and make your trunks if you want. These are like super simple trees, so I don't mind if it's monochromatic. Let's just do another one, maybe smaller. Maybe this is in the distance. Let all these wet shapes just sort of link up. You know, and again, I can't overemphasize keeping that overall tree structure in mind. And I've done that whether it's just these flat tree shapes or whether it's the ones with the darker values. Find yourself some real tree reference. Don't do it from your head. If you really, really want to get good at loose and simplified foliage, you really want to improve on your trees and your foliage, this is the kind of work you have to do. But I do hope this gives you some ideas for practicing simplification. And you know, these still have great benefits for doing more detailed trees. If you want to go in and put in a detailed trees, you've got the bones. You can go in and start adding a few extra details. You say, I want a little bit more detailed tree than that. That's fine. And you can go in and do that. And usually it's best to keep your detail to the contrast edges. But these structures are the bones. These overall large zones of value are what you need to get down, and they need to echo the real structure of a tree. Go out and get to know a tree. Thanks everybody. I appreciate you watching. Thank you patrons for sponsoring my channel. And we will see everybody in the next video.